What happens when a ruthless billionaire hands a 12-year-old boy a death sentence disguised as a gift? When Jimmy White dropped a crippled, dying lion cub at the feet of a struggling family, he didn't do it out of kindness. He did it to bankrupt them, to break their spirit, and to steal their land. He expected the cub to die within days. He expected the boy to give up, but he made one fatal miscalculation. He didn't realize that the trash he was throwing away was actually a king in disguise. You are about to hear a story of a bond that defied veterinary science, a betrayal that exposed a dark criminal empire, and a moment of justice so raw and powerful it left an entire nation stunned. This is not just a story about a lion, it is a war for the soul of the wild. Before we unleash this incredible journey, please take a split second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out and ensures we can keep bringing you these powerful stories. Now let's head into the heat of the South African bush, where a storm is about to break. The heat in the Eastern Cape did not simply exist, it possessed the land. It was a physical weight, pressing down with a suffocating dusty hand that smelled of baked red earth, dying sage, and the sweet, rot-tinged scent of overripe marula fruit. For 12-year-old Liam Baxter, this heat was a constant companion, a silent witness to the slow, agonizing decay of everything he loved. He stood by the perimeter fence of Oka Ridge Haven, his fingers curled around the wire mesh. The metal was hot enough to sting, but he didn't let go. He needed the sensation, a sharp reminder that he was still here, still fighting. He stared out at the shimmering horizon, where the heat haze turned the scrubland into a watery mirage. Behind him, the sanctuary was too quiet. It used to be a place of noise. The braying of zebras, the chattering of vervet monkeys, the confident bark of his father Toby directing volunteers. Now the only sound was the rhythmic wheezing chug of the diesel generator fighting to keep the medicine fridges cold, a mechanical heartbeat that skipped and sputtered, threatening to flatline at any moment. Liam wiped a bead of sweat from his temple, leaving a streak of grime on his pale skin. He looked down at his sneakers. The rubber sole of the left shoe was peeling away from the canvas, flapping like a hungry mouth with every step. He tried to ignore the knot of anxiety that lived permanently in his stomach now. It wasn't just the poverty, the meals of maize, porridge, and tinned beans that gnawed at him. It was the silence. It had been 3 years since the accident. 3 years since the laughter had been sucked out of the farmhouse, along with his mother's life. Amy Baxter. The name still felt heavy in his mouth, like a stone he couldn't swallow. She had been the soul of this place, an ethologist who could walk into a cage with a snarling leopard and come out with a purring friend. She understood the language of the wild better than she understood people. Without her, Toby was a ship without a rudder, a good man drowning in grief and debt, moving through the days like a ghost haunting his own life. Liam! Toby's voice cracked across the yard, sounding weary even at this early hour. The water truck is here. I need help with the hoses. The pump is jamming again. Liam pushed off the fence, his legs heavy, and jogged toward the main building. The sanctuary was a shadow of its former self. The education center, once bright with children's murals, was closed, the paint peeling in long, sunburned strips like dead skin. The enclosures were mostly empty, save for a few geriatric goats and a 3-legged jackal named Buster who spent his days sleeping in the shade of a thorn tree. They were a hospice for the unwanted, a waiting room for the end. As Liam began to unspool the heavy black rubber hose, smelling the stale, metallic scent of the recycled water, he heard a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the rattle of the local farm trucks or the wind in the acacia. It was a low, throaty purr of expensive engineering. He paused, shading his eyes against the glare. A convoy was approaching from the east, kicking up a plume of dust that looked like a storm front. 3 pristine, white Land Rovers navigated the rutted track with arrogant ease. The lead vehicle bore a logo in gold leaf that caught the sun, flashing like a heliograph signal, the gilded Savannah Lodge. Liam's stomach turned over. Jimmy White. Toby came out of the clinic, wiping his hands on a rag stained with iodine. He froze when he saw the vehicles. Liam watched his father's jaw set hard, a muscle feathering in his cheek. Jimmy White was the antithesis of the Baxters. He was a billionaire property developer who had bought the neighboring land 5 years ago, fencing off thousands of hectares to create a playground for the ultra-rich. He viewed animals as inventory, stock prices with heartbeats. He had been trying to buy Oak Ridge for years, not because he cared about the rehab work, but because the Baxter land sat on top of the aquifer he needed to water the greens of his proposed golf course. The convoy ground to a halt in the center of the yard, the pristine white paint looking alien and offensive against the rusty brown backdrop of the sanctuary. The engines cut, and for a moment the silence returned, heavier than before. Then, doors opened. Men in crisp khaki uniforms spilled out, carrying cameras and boom microphones. Finally, the driver's door of the lead car opened. Jimmy White stepped out. He was a man who looked like he had been polished. His skin was tanned to a perfect bronze. His teeth were blindingly white, and his safari suit was tailored to fit a body that had never done a day of manual labor in its life. He smelled of expensive cologne, sandalwood and citrus, that clashed violently with the smell of dust and dung. "Toby!" Jimmy called out, his voice booming with a false camaraderie that made the hair on Liam's arms stand up. "Good to see you, neighbor. Scorcher today, isn't it? Though I suppose you're used to the heat." Toby didn't smile. He crossed his arms over his chest, a defensive barrier. "What do you want, Jimmy? We're busy. We have animals to feed." "Always working. Always working," Jimmy chided, walking closer while the camera crew scrambled to get a shot that framed him heroically against the dilapidated barn. "That's why I admire you, Toby. That grit, that stubborn determination." He signaled to one of his men, a giant with a shaved head and eyes like cold flint, Janis Gert. Janis went to the back of the Land Rover and hauled out a large, plastic transport crate. He handled it roughly, swinging it down into the dust with a thud that made Liam flinch. "I'm here to help," Jimmy said, turning slightly so his good side caught the afternoon light. "We had a birth at the lodge this morning. My prize lioness. A beautiful litter, truly, but, well, nature can be cruel." Janis unlatched the crate. A pathetic, wet sound came from inside. A wheezing, rattling gasp that sounded like a small bellows with a hole in it. Liam stepped forward, drawn by a magnetic pull he couldn't control. He ignored his father's hand reaching out to stop him. He knelt in the dust and peered through the slats of the crate. Inside, lying in a puddle of its own filth, was a lion cub. But it didn't look like a lion. It looked like a mistake. It was tiny, far smaller than it should have been, its fur patchy and matted with mucus. Its hind legs were twisted at an odd angle, splayed out uselessly. Every breath was a battle, the small ribcage heaving violently to suck in air. "The vet says it's a waste of resources," Jimmy said, his voice dropping to a somber, theatrical register meant for the cameras. "Respiratory failure, hip dysplasia, failure to thrive. He said I should put it down. Humane euthanasia. But I thought of you, Toby. I thought of this sanctuary. You take in the hopeless cases, don't you?" Toby knelt beside Liam. He was a vet. He knew death when he saw it. He looked at the cub, his expression softening into pity, then hardening into anger as he looked up at Jimmy. "You want me to take a dying animal so you don't have to dirty your hands killing it? Or is this about the PR, the benevolent billionaire giving the little guy a chance?" "I'm offering you a donation," Jimmy corrected, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "A chance to prove that Oak Ridge is still relevant. If you can save him, he's yours. A gift, from one animal lover to another." "Jimmy, this cub is suffering," Toby said, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. "He needs oxygen, antibiotics, orthopedic surgery. We don't have the money for that. It would be cruel to prolong this just for your photo op." "So you refuse?" Jimmy asked, his eyebrows raising. The camera zoomed in on Toby's face. "You refuse to try?" Liam felt a heat rise in his chest that had nothing to do with the sun. It was a fierce, protective fire. He looked at the cub again. The creature opened its eyes, milky, unfocused blue orbs, and let out a soft, pained mewl. In that sound, Liam didn't just hear an animal, he heard an echo. He remembered the nights he had spent crying into his pillow after his mother died. the feeling of being small and broken in a world that didn't care. He saw a creature that had been judged by its flaws and discarded. "We'll take him," Liam said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the silence like a whip crack. Toby looked up, startled. "Liam, no, we can't." "We have to," Liam said, standing up and stepping between his father and Jimmy White. He looked at the billionaire, his young eyes fierce and unblinking. Mom wouldn't have walked away. She never walked away. The mention of Amy hung in the air like smoke. Toby flinched, the pain visible in his eyes. He looked at his son, seeing the same stubborn set of the jaw that his wife had possessed, the same refusal to accept the impossible. He looked at the cub, then back at Jimmy, who was watching with a predatory amusement. Jimmy expected them to fail. He expected the cub to die, draining their last few rands, leaving them broken and ready to sell. "Fine," Toby whispered, the fight draining out of him. "Leave the crate." Jimmy clapped his hands together. "Excellent! A heartwarming story in the making. The boy and the beast. We'll be checking in on you, Toby. Make sure you don't disappoint us." As the dust settled from their departure, the silence returned. But now, it was punctuated by the ragged, desperate breathing of the cub. Liam knelt in the dirt, unlatched the door, and reached inside. The cub didn't pull away. It leaned into his hand, seeking warmth, shivering violently. "You're not trash," Liam whispered, his throat tight with unshed tears. "You're just waiting." The first week was a blur of sleepless nights and terrified prayers. They named him Atlas, a name Liam found in an old book of maps in the study, hoping the tiny creature could one day carry the weight of his own survival. Toby set up a makeshift ICU in the living room, pushing the coffee table aside to make room for the crate. He tented it with plastic sheets and hooked up a rusted oxygen tank that hissed softly in the corner. But the prognosis was grim. The cub refused to eat. The rubber nipple of the bottle was too hard, the formula too strange. He was fading, his small heart beating like a trapped moth against his ribs. By the fourth night, the mood in the farmhouse was funereal. The only light came from a kerosene lamp that threw long, dancing shadows against the walls. Toby sat in the armchair, his head in his hands. "He's checking out, Liam," Toby said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "His temperature is dropping. We have to let him go. It's selfish to keep him going." Liam was sitting on the floor, his back against the crate. He shook his head, his eyes burning. "No, not yet. Liam." "I found them, Dad," Liam interrupted. He pulled a stack of books from under the sofa. They were leather-bound, worn at the corners, smelling of lavender and rain. Amy's journals. Toby froze. He hadn't been able to touch them since the funeral. "I've been reading," Liam said, his voice trembling. He opened the top journal to a marked page. Mom wrote about this. She called it The Resonance of Trauma. She said that cubs rejected by their mothers often die of heartbreak, not just hunger. Their nervous systems shut down because they don't feel the frequency. "The frequency?" Toby rubbed his face. "Liam, that was theoretical. She never finished that study. It was fringe science. She said mother lions purr at a specific low frequency," Liam insisted, tracing the ink his mother had written years ago. "Between 20 and 50 hertz. It stimulates bone healing and digestion. It tells them they're safe. It tells them they exist." Liam didn't wait for permission. He stood up and went to the garage. He scavenged parts from an old stereo system Toby had meant to fix for years. He took a subwoofer, stripping the wires with his teeth, and connected it to a tone generator app on his cracked tablet. He brought the speaker back into the living room and placed it against the side of the crate, right where the cub's chest was pressed against the plastic. He set the frequency to 25 hertz, a deep, vibrating hum that you felt in your teeth more than you heard with your ears. Then, he did what the journal said next. He reached into the crate, placed his warm hands on the cub's atrophied hips, and began to massage. "What are you doing?" Toby asked softly. "Reconnecting him," Liam whispered. For an hour, nothing happened. The room vibrated with the low thrum of the speaker. Liam's hands ached, but he didn't stop. He closed his eyes, imagining his mother's hands guiding his, imagining the energy flowing from him into the dying animal. Live, he thought. Please, just live. Don't leave me alone. Around 3 a.m., the miracle happened. It started with a twitch. The cub's ear flicked. Then, the erratic, shallow panting hitched and smoothed out. The cub's breathing synced with the rhythm of the subwoofer. Deep, slow, rhythmic. Atlas lifted his head. The milky blue eyes opened, and for the first time, they seemed to focus on Liam. The cub opened his mouth and let out a sound. Not a cry, but a tiny, answering rumble. A purr. Liam grabbed the bottle of warm formula. He offered it. This time, Atlas didn't turn away. He latched on. The suction was weak at first, then frantic. Desperate. He drank until his belly was round and tight. Toby watched from the chair, tears streaming silently down his face. He wasn't just watching a lion eat. He was watching his son come back to life. That night was the turning point. Over the next 18 months, the farmhouse transformed. The living room became a nursery, then a gymnasium. Liam followed Amy's journals like a holy text. He used resistance bands to strengthen Atlas's hind legs, playing tug-of-war with the growing cub. He mixed specific calcium supplements into the meat to fuse the hip bones. And Atlas didn't just survive, he exploded. It was as if the genetic code inside him, repressed by sickness, had suddenly been unlocked. By the time he was a year old, he was already larger than the average adult male. His coat, once patchy and dull, was a tawny gold that shimmered like velvet. But the most striking feature was his mane. It began to darken at the roots, spreading like ink in water. By 18 months, a thick, luxurious collar of charcoal black framed his massive head. It was a trait not seen in the region for decades, the mark of the legendary extinct Cape lion. The bond between boy and lion deepened into something that defied veterinary science. Liam didn't use whips or treats to control Atlas. They moved together with a silent language of gestures and gazes. When Liam felt sad, missing his mother, Atlas would sense it from across the enclosure. The lion would chuff softly, pressing his massive head against the wire until Liam came to sit with him, burying his face in the coarse, dark mane. One scorching afternoon, the air thick with the buzzing of cicadas, Liam was in the main enclosure. Atlas, now a 400-pound titan, was stalking him through the long grass. To an outsider, it would have looked terrifying, a predator hunting prey. Liam sat on a fallen log, his back to the lion. He could hear the crushing of dry grass, the heavy intake of breath. He counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Just as Atlas launched himself, Liam spun around. He didn't run. He dropped to his knees and opened his arms. Atlas hit him, not with claws, but with a tackle that rolled them both into the red dust. The lion pinned Liam down, growling playfully, and began to lick his face with a tongue like sandpaper. Liam laughed, a pure, uninhibited sound that rang out across the sanctuary. "Get off, you heavy oaf!" Liam gasped, pushing against the massive chest. Atlas just rumbled, a sound that vibrated through Liam's ribs, and rested his chin on the boy's head. On the road overlooking the sanctuary, a tourist bus had pulled over, lost on its way to the gilded savannah. A dozen tourists had their phones pressed to the windows, recording the impossible scene. A skinny boy wrestling a black-maned monster in the dust, both of them alive with a joy that seemed to light up the desolate landscape. The video was uploaded an hour later. The title was simple, "The Boy and the Black-Maned Giant." By morning, the world had changed. Liam woke to the sound of his father shouting, not in anger, but in shock. He ran to the kitchen. Toby was staring at the laptop screen, his hands shaking. "Liam, look!" Toby choked out. "Look at the donations." The crowdfunding page, which had sat stagnant at a few $100 for months, was spinning like a slot machine. 5,000, 10,000, 50,000. Comments were flooding in from Tokyo, New York, London. People were captivated by the sheer majesty of the lion and the obvious love of the boy. "We can fix the roof," Toby said, weeping openly. "We can buy the new X-ray machine. We can pay the feed bill. Liam, you did it. You saved him and he saved us." But 50 miles away, in the cool, air-conditioned office of the gilded Savannah Lodge, Jimmy White was not laughing. He was staring at the same video on a 4K monitor. He wasn't looking at the boy, he was zooming in on the lion, He picked up his phone, his knuckles white. "Get the geneticist on the line," Jimmy barked. "And tell Janice to prep the trucks. I made a mistake. I threw away a winning lottery ticket." The reprieve was short-lived. The joy at Oak Ridge was shattered 3 days later by the arrival of a black sedan, trailing dust like a hearse, followed by the familiar white Land Rover. Jimmy White stepped out, but this time the charm was gone. He was flanked by Yanis Gert and a woman in a sharp gray suit carrying a briefcase. Toby met them on the porch, his newfound confidence faltering under Jimmy's icy, possessive stare. "You're trespassing, Jimmy," Toby said, standing in the doorway. "I'm visiting my property," Jimmy replied smoothly. He gestured to the woman. "This is Sarah Davies, my legal counsel." Sarah Davies was younger than Liam expected. She had sharp, intelligent eyes that scanned the dilapidated sanctuary with an unreadable expression. She didn't look like she belonged with a man like Jimmy. She looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Baxter?" Sarah said, her voice professional but lacking Jimmy's malice. "We are here to serve you with a repossession order regarding the lion known as Atlas." "Repossession?" Toby laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "He gave that lion to us. He was dying. We saved him." "You fostered him," Jimmy corrected, stepping forward, invading Toby's personal space. "Read the contract, Toby. You signed it. Clause 14b. The Gilded Savannah Lodge retains ownership of all genetic material and offspring of lodge livestock. The recipient facility acts as a temporary guardian until such time as the donor sees fit to reclaim the asset." Toby paled. He remembered the day Jimmy had arrived with the dying cub. He remembered the blinding sun, the pressure, the desperation to just get the suffering animal help. He hadn't read the fine print. "He's not an asset," Liam shouted, running from the hallway to stand beside his father. "He's family! You threw him away like trash!" Jimmy looked down at Liam, his eyes cold and dead. "He is a genetic throwback to the Cape Lion, boy. Do you know what that's worth? American hunters will pay $500,000 just for the chance to hang that black mane on their wall. And breeders? They'll pay double for his sperm." The blood drained from Liam's face. The world tilted. "You want to kill him?" "I want to monetize him," Jimmy said, checking his gold watch. "You have 48 hours to prepare him for transport. If you resist, I'll sue you for breach of contract, theft of intellectual property, and I'll bury this sanctuary in so much litigation you'll be paying me off until you die." He turned on his heel. "Come on, Sarah." Sarah lingered for a moment. She looked at Liam, who was clutching one of his mother's journals to his chest like a shield. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw the handwriting on the cover. Is that Amy's handwriting?" she asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You knew her?" Liam asked defensively, stepping back. "We went to university together," Sarah said, a flicker of genuine pain crossing her face. She looked at Jimmy's retreating back, then leaned in close to Liam. "Check the dates, Liam. Check the dates in the back of the book. The week she died." Before Liam could ask what she meant, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the dry earth, leaving Liam with a mystery that made his blood run cold. That night, the sanctuary felt like a fortress under siege. The heat had broken, replaced by a brooding electric tension. A storm was rolling in from the Indian Ocean, heavy with thunder. The wind whipped the acacia trees, making them scratch against the tin roof like skeletal fingers. Toby was on the phone in the kitchen, his voice rising in desperation as legal aid rejected him again and again. Liam sat in his room, the journal open on his lap. "Check the dates." He flipped to the very end of the last journal. The entries here were different. They weren't the neat, scientific notes about animal behavior. They were erratic, written in a shaky hand, the ink blotted as if she had been writing in a hurry. October 14th. Saw the trucks again tonight. Unmarked, heading north to the border, not the lodge. Why move animals at night? October 16th. I tracked the tire marks. They lead to the old quarry on the White Estate. The smell. God, the smell. It's a bone pit. October 17th. I saw the lioness. The one he calls the queen. She isn't captive bred. She has the scars of a snare on her leg. She's wild. He's stealing them from the national parks in the north and claiming them as his own stock to launder the genetics. If he's breeding wild lions with his captive stock, he's violating the Biodiversity Act. He's trafficking. October 18th. I'm going to the police tomorrow. I have the photos on the drive. Liam stopped breathing. October 19th was the day his mother's car had gone off the road. The police had called it an accident, a blown tire on a sharp bend. But Amy was the most careful driver Liam knew. He looked out the window toward the enclosure. Atlas was pacing, agitated by the dropping barometric pressure. Liam realized the truth with a clarity that made him nauseous. Atlas wasn't just a lion. He was the son of a stolen wild queen. He was living proof of Jimmy White's crimes. And Jimmy knew it. That's why he wanted the lion back. Not just for the money, but to hide the evidence. The lights in the farmhouse flickered. Once. Twice. Then they died. Total darkness swallowed the room. The hum of the refrigerator cut out. The silence was sudden and terrifying. "Dad?" Liam called out, stumbling into the hallway. "Stay there, Liam!" Toby's voice came from the kitchen. The breaker must have tripped. Or the storm knocked a line down. But Liam knew better. He ran to the window facing the yard. Through the driving rain that had begun to slash against the glass, he saw beams of light cutting through the darkness near the lion enclosure. Not lightning. Flashlights. Tactical beams slicing through the rain. They weren't waiting for the 48 hours. They were coming for Atlas now. Liam didn't think. He didn't call for his father. He grabbed the heavy flashlight from the hallway table and the journal. He burst out the back door into the raging storm. The wind hit him like a physical blow, screaming through the thorns. The rain was torrential, turning the dust into slick red mud instantly. It soaked his clothes in seconds, blinding him. He ran toward the enclosure, slipping and sliding, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. As he neared the fence, he saw the chain on the main gate had been cut. It lay in the mud like a dead snake. Inside the enclosure, chaos was unfolding. Giannis Gert and two other men were moving through the tall grass, their rain ponchos flapping in the wind. Giannis held a tranquilizer rifle. The other two held catch poles. They were hunting. "Atlas!" Liam screamed, his voice torn away by the wind. The lion was backed into the far corner of the enclosure, near the rocky kopje. He was snarling, a sound that cut through the thunder. But he was confused. These men smelled like metal and aggression. They didn't smell like Liam. Janice raised the rifle. He wasn't aiming for the flank to sedate. He was aiming high, near the head. Liam scrambled through the open gate, his sneakers fighting for grip in the slurry. "Stop! You can't take him!" Janice spun around, blinding Liam with his tactical light. "Get out of here, kid. Go back to the house." "You killed her!" Liam yelled, raising the journal as if it were a shield against the bullets. "I know about the trucks. I know about the wild lions. I know you killed my mother." Janice froze. Even in the rain, Liam saw the man's posture shift from annoyance to genuine menace. He lowered the rifle from the lion and pointed it toward Liam. "You should have stayed asleep, boy." A low rumble vibrated through the ground, deeper than the thunder. Atlas had moved. He wasn't cowering anymore. He had seen the weapon pointed at the boy who hummed the safety sound, the boy who brought the food, the boy who was part of the pride. Atlas launched himself. It wasn't the clumsy lunge of the cub he had been. It was a streak of black and gold power. Atlas hit Janice from the side, a 400-pound missile of muscle and fury. The rifle flew into the mud. Janice screamed as he hit the ground, the breath driven out of him. The other two mercenaries panicked. One swung a catchpole, hitting Atlas on the shoulder. The lion roared, a sound so loud it felt like it shattered the air pressure in the enclosure. He swatted the man aside with a paw the size of a dinner plate, claws sheathed but hitting with the force of a sledgehammer. The man went flying into the mud. "Liam, get down!" Toby's voice. A gunshot cracked, a warning shot fired into the air. Toby was standing at the gate, his old hunting rifle shouldered, his face a mask of terrified determination. The mercenary scrambled back, dragging a groaning Janice with them toward the waiting trucks outside the fence. But the nightmare wasn't over. A roar of an engine drowned out the storm. A massive armored SUV, Jimmy White's custom vehicle, smashed through the perimeter fence, flattening the steel posts as if they were straw. Jimmy was behind the wheel, his face twisted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He had lost control of the narrative, and for a man like Jimmy, that was the ultimate sin. He revved the engine and drove straight into the enclosure, his high beams blinding Atlas. He was trying to herd the lion, to run him down, to crush the problem under his tires. "No!" Liam sprinted across the mud, placing himself between the blinding lights and the lion. Jimmy slammed on the brakes, the heavy vehicle skidding in the slurry, stopping inches from Liam. The window rolled down. Jimmy was waving a handgun. He looked unhinged, his perfect hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. "Move, you stupid kid! I own him! I own all of this! He's not yours!" Liam shouted back, trembling but planting his feet in the mud. "He's evidence!" "Then I'll destroy the evidence!" Jimmy screamed. He leveled the gun past Liam, aiming at the confused, pacing lion. Liam didn't run. He closed his eyes and remembered the frequency. He remembered the bond. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silent dog whistle he used for training, the one that signaled, "Protect," but he didn't blow it. Instead, he turned to Atlas and made a sharp chuffing sound, dropping his body low. "Attack." Atlas didn't hesitate. He didn't go for the man. He went for the machine. The lion leaped onto the hood of the SUV. Metal crunched under his weight. He roared directly through the windshield, shattering the safety glass into fragments. Jimmy shrieked, throwing his hands up to protect his face, dropping the gun into the footwell. Atlas dug his claws into the hood, shaking the entire vehicle, his jaws snapping inches from Jimmy's face. The terrifying power of the apex predator was on full display. Jimmy White, the billionaire who thought he could buy nature, was suddenly just meat in a metal can, facing the wrath of the wild. "Call him off! Call him off!" Jimmy sobbed, curled into a ball. Liam stepped forward, placing a hand on the lion's flank. The muscle beneath the fur was hard as rock, vibrating with adrenaline. "Down, Atlas!" The command was soft, but the lion obeyed instantly. He slid off the hood, chuffing, and sat down beside Liam. He looked at the boy, his amber eyes clear. "I am here. We are safe." Blue lights flashed in the distance, cutting through the storm. Sirens wailed, getting louder, a chorus of justice finally arriving. Liam watched as 3 police cruisers and a tactical van skidded into the yard. Officers spilled out, weapons drawn. But they weren't aiming at the lion. They were aiming at the SUV. Sarah Davies stepped out of the lead police car. She wasn't wearing her suit jacket anymore. She was soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her face, but she was smiling. She walked straight to Toby, who was lowering his rifle. "I called the Hawks," she said, her voice steady over the rain. "I told them everything. About the trafficking, the poaching, and Amy. I couldn't let him do it again." Detectives hauled a weeping Jimmy White out of the ruined SUV. They found the gun. They found the tranquilizer rifle dropped by Janice. And when Liam handed the lead detective the leather-bound journal, wrapped in plastic to protect it from the rain, the detective looked at the page dated October 17th, looked at the bone pit coordinates, and nodded grimly. "It's over, son," the detective said to Liam, his voice kind. "We've got him." The sun rose over the eastern cape the next morning, burning away the storm clouds. The air smelled clean, washed of the dust and the heat, smelling of wet earth and new beginnings. 6 months later, Oak Ridge Haven was unrecognizable. The rusty fence was gone, replaced by state-of-the-art security mesh paid for by international grants. The clinic had a new roof and a new sign painted in bright, hopeful letters: the Amy Baxter Wildlife Research Center. The court case had been the biggest scandal in South African conservation history. Jimmy White's empire had crumbled. The forensic excavation of the quarry had confirmed everything Amy had written. The fostering clause was null and void, ruled as part of a criminal racketeering enterprise. Liam sat on the high rocky outcrop in the center of the main enclosure, The evening light was turning the valley into a painting of gold and violet. Beside him sat Atlas. The lion was fully grown now, a magnificent creature of muscle and grace, his black mane thick and heavy, swaying in the breeze. Liam leaned back against the lion's warm side. He opened a new journal, the pages crisp and white. Entry 1. Dad says we have 3 new interns starting tomorrow. Sarah is handling the legal work for the land expansion. We're going to release the antelope next month. He paused, looking out at the horizon. He could feel the vibration of Atlas's purr against his spine, the frequency of healing. It was the same sound that had saved the cub, and the same sound that had saved Liam. He thought of his mother, not with the sharp, stabbing pain of grief that used to cripple him, but with a warm, steady ache of love. She had left him a map in those journals, a way to find his way back to life. Jimmy White had tried to destroy them with a gift meant to be a burden. He had looked at a broken boy and a broken cub and seen nothing of value. He had been wrong. Liam closed the book and rested his hand on the lion's head. Atlas turned and licked Liam's hand, his rough tongue a grounding comfort. "We made it, Mom," Liam whispered to the wind. The lion let out a soft huff, closed his eyes, and together they watched the sun dip below the edge of the world, kings of their own quiet kingdom. If this powerful story moved you, subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another epic tale of courage, adventure, and the extraordinary world of lions. Share this video with a friend who would love this story.